Hey guys, welcome back. This is your designated inquirer. My name's Axel, and today is 8/11/2020. Now, today was a very busy day in terms of the news cycle, in terms of economic indicators, etc., in terms of information that'll move the markets, information that's important for humanity, information that, lets us know what's probably going to be happening here in the next few days, at least, if not the next few months. Now, first on the list is the Russia vaccine. It hasn't even finished essentially what is its, first stage clinical trials for their vaccine. They just basically have given it to a grand total of 75 people and have deemed it okay for human use in terms of for the general population. What they're practically doing, because I don't know if they don't have enough money or they don't have the medical know-how, which I doubt. I'm sure they have both, but they probably don't want to use it, and they think that if they go much longer without some sort of vaccine, that their economy is going to collapse, which may actually be the case. So if anything, it might be a greater indictment on Putin for acting way too quickly out of fear, and in which case it makes perfect sense. But they're giving it to quote unquote doctors and nurses and people that would supposedly need it first. But apart from this, other countries have gone and taken out loans, etc. Not loans, but basically orders. They've taken out orders to buy some of this vaccine from Russia. And it's basically untested. They basically bought untested vaccines from Russia. And are they gonna feel comfortable giving it to their citizens? I don't know. I really don't. Is it actually useful? Nobody knows, because they haven't gone through the proper measures to actually measure efficacy. And the market knew this. It started off okay. Because they thought they had something. They thought they had something there. It's like, oh my god, Russia came out with this vaccine, we're all saved. Nope, not the case. When basically more information came out as to exactly how many people that they've given it to, and that Putin is basically putting on this political stunt in giving it to his own daughter, quote unquote. I'm sure she has it, quote unquote. I believe him, quote unquote. It's probably not the case, and the more that became apparent, the closer to, it started, kind of turn around a little bit. So it initially went up because this was news that came out at the beginning of the day. Then it later dropped to whatever this level is, around 267 on QQQ. Okay. From there, it was basically trying to test the highs that are made overnight, etc., to see what fair price on the upper end would be for the stock market, etc. So basically, from a technical standpoint, the market was just running through its paces. No huge amount of news came out, etc., even from Congress. No news from Congress, no news from the president, no news from overseas. There was basically nothing huge that happened at as far as we know. Bonds, the yield of bonds went up slightly. It has basically been ending its downward momentum, which has been its slowest levels since ever, basically, since it's been recorded. And that in of itself is a gigantic problem also, because yield in terms of investment vehicle is what you would pay to get, what you would let somebody borrow, and what you charge to get some in return. The price that you extract from somebody from you lending them money, In this case, generally for bonds, it's you letting the country borrow money and the country goes and pays you interest. The overall amount that you lend and or you purchase the bond for versus what you get in return is the yield, that percent. The percent that you get back on the amount that you let borrow is the yield that investment, that venture gave you. Considering that the US government has yet to actually go default, not necessarily feign default, which happened under Republican control of the House under Boehner, when we basically had our temporarily had our credit rating downgraded because that was ridiculous. Bonds from the US government are basically seen as ironclad, as one of the safest financial instruments in the world. So if there is danger out in the world, you're basically willing, if you don't think that there is another financial vehicle that is going to basically pay you a significant percentage above inflation, and or that you find it that even taking a risk with inflation is still safer than putting your money out into the market, inflation, the yield is going to go down. Considering that the yield has been at its lowest levels basically since ever being recorded, what that means is that investors largely found it very hard to find investments that were safe enough to put their money in, considering that inflation is still at around maybe 2%, and that the yield was hovering around 0.5%, etc. That means that the net yield was actually negative. So people were in effect willing to lose money year over year continuously, but a known and limited amount to a certain percentage versus keeping their money out in the market. This is where we're at right now. This is how much turmoil there is in the market, and yet people believe that being above the February highs here is a perfectly reasonable idea. No, current investment and economic indicators do not tell you that right now is a good time to be out in equities. No. Bad market. Shame on you. No. This is where we're at. So today was kind of interesting. Okay, this is our third day in a row, which has hardly happened since basically here. We haven't had 3 days in a row of it moving down, except for maybe here. Here we had 3 days going down, but not sequentially and as tightly formed. Like there has been nary a day where there have been 3 days in a row that this stock market went down. Okay, it's been really, really tough to find days in a row where the market has gone down. So this could be the start of something heavy, or it could be a fake out. We don't know, because it did happen. It happened right here. It went down technically 3 days in a row, even though here it went up technically, so that one shouldn't really even count. But here, from the previous days, it went down one day, closed down the next day, and it closed down today. Okay, so that's 3 days in a row. We have basically broken more or less a streak that the market has had over the last 3-4 months since March. So it's kind of significant, and it wasn't even in a weak manner. This was a pretty significant move. If we move to the 5-minute whatnot, like these moves further down, if we're looking at percentages of from point to point, here's a full percent down lower, and from here to there is another basically 0.8%. From the high of the intraday high, it's kind of, it's getting up there, 2.7%. It's substantial. It's not nothing. after hours, it has recovered. And so, what was a piece of information that today let people know, this might not be very good? Well, looking back at my notes here, it was a few things. One, that there's still no deal between Congress, the Senate, and the president in terms of what sort of actual stimulus to bring out and to help the American people. Donald Trump's executive orders, as of this moment, still do not help the American people to such an extent that an actual stimulus bill would. In fact, it causes probably more problems technically than it solves. So that's one. The executive order that President Trump did make actually created probably a little bit more of a problem in that it took pressure off of the Senate to actually be able to come to the table and make a deal with the House. Third, Congress is basically out to lunch till they basically have to come back to session and vote to whether or not keep the government open. That's going to be an actual fight, hopefully, that we don't have to make before election day. I really hope that's not something that we do. And it might be something that we end up doing because who knows, Trump may get the bright idea to hold the entire government hostage for making legal his payroll tax cut and or other shenanigans that he wants personally to benefit basically him, his buddies, his family, and none of us that make less than $50,000 a year. Like, we're not going to see any of that money. Like, a tax cut serves people on a percentage basis, and people that make the most money are going to get a larger chunk of the overall pie. It's never really been fair. The most fair thing that's basically come out of the government has been the stimulus checks and the unemployment checks, the supplemental, the enhanced help that has been given by the Treasury. Now, moving on. So, but that was only a contributing factor to the following. Basically, the moment that this piece of news came out, the market tanked. Whether or not it actually was the news that came out live over CNBC or if it was something else, I'm not exactly sure, but it was at the moment that it was announced on CNBC. So I don't have any other choice really but to attribute it to the following, which was Pac-10 schools were canceling all fall sports. That was it. That was a thing. That was the thing that broke the camel's back. That was the thing that drove the market basically from over here when it was kind of waffling about, and it did this, and then it tried to come up, and then it slid some more. From this point right here where it was basically waffling about, where it still had a chance to come up to the day, to the previous open, etc., whatnot, or keep waffling about, not necessarily taking a direction or a stance on where to go, this is the thing that broke it. When that information came out, it decided to drop. What does this mean? Why did this do it? My suspicion is the following. One, that all these traders and hedge fund managers that didn't go to a regular school, that didn't go to like CSUSB, they didn't go to Cal State LA, they didn't go to like small schools, they didn't go to state universities like that are pretty much not known as well, right? They're basically rubbing shoulders and they got into top tier league schools, whether or not it's Horton, whether or not it's Yale, whether or not it's etc. More than likely, one of these schools happened to be part of the Pac-10. Because these schools basically said, apart from them holding classes online and not necessarily holding classes in person, them canceling sports, which is more than likely something that these hedge fund managers and these stock traders, these testosterone meat-brained Neanderthals participated in, was probably sports in college. They all probably think the same way, and because something that they actually participated in was affected, and that they no longer will be able to see that their colleges participate in sports, something that they kill time with, etc. This let them know that the effect that the coronavirus is having on the rest of society is actually means something. So now that they're basically facing something that lets them be more sympathetic to the rest of us, because 160 plus people dying wasn't enough. It wasn't rising cases. It wasn't that teachers could probably get sick from trying to teach kids that are going to school with that probably are barely wearing any masks, that can walk through a hallway basically shoulder to shoulder with no masks on, and being able to spread a virus that probably barely affects the kids but could probably kill the teachers and or their parents and or their grandparents, because let's face it, a lot of us live in multi-generational homes. That just happens to be the case. This is where we're at as a society. And why is that? I can keep going. Is because, millennials, people like me, can't necessarily go out and afford their own home, or they need help from grandparents or parents to take care of their kids, because they can't afford childcare. There's a lot of things that are happening to this country that doesn't let people afford to be able to live in individual generation homes. We basically have to commune together because it is expensive out there for everybody. The resources that we have as a country are not distributed to an effect to alleviate, to let us be able to afford childcare, healthcare, education, all of these things. Like, this is a reality where most Americans are living in these kinds of conditions. And if most Americans are living in these kinds of conditions, it stands that most people could probably not actually afford to get sick. Not only afford in the monetary sense, because yes, it would probably mean a hospital bill, but also from a health perspective, that there are more than likely people in a household that are either immune deficient, immune compromised, or elderly. Because we as a nation also don't take care of our health. A lot of us happen to have a large portion of the obese population of the entire world. Us as a population of humans have a large proportion of us that happen to be obese, diabetic, and have health problems. Chronic health problems from the diet that we are fed by McDonald's and a bunch of other places that probably shouldn't be selling food, at least the kind of food. And if they're selling food, we don't get the education enough as a society to let us know that we probably shouldn't be eating that food on the regular. But this is America. This is where we're at. And so that's the result of where we are. Basically, because these traders and frat boys ended up getting sad, this is why we ended up selling off. Apart from that, them canceling all the Pac-10 games from the fall games for these college towns, etc., is also going to affect the general economy, because all of these towns are going to see a downturn in terms of economic activity. They're not going to be able to sell out bars. They're not going to be able to sell as much food. They're not going to, like the liquor stores, the general stores in terms of selling merchandise for the Pac-10 games are not going to be able to sell their stuff. There isn't going to be as many Etsy, even makers, etc., that make custom-made college design things. Like, there's a lot of stuff that is sustained by the economic activity provided by the Pac-10 games. Apart from that being an actual thing, where the economic actual activity from that isn't huge, it's not a major proportion of the U.S. like GDP, it is something that did hit on a personal level to the people who happen to be trading the stock market. Predominantly, the ones that have the most influence most likely felt this on a personal level. Maybe. That is my best guess as to why this piece of information actually hit the stock market the way it did. Yep. That's it. So, what this also means is that this downturn this movement downward, it can probably be continued here into the future. In terms of like statistical probability of what can possibly happen, that's probably probabilistically what could happen. Still, do your due diligence, ask your financial advisor. I am not licensed financially to give financial advice. You still have to decide things on your own. Do your due diligence to decide what to do with your portfolio. Thank you. Now, till next time, you guys stay safe, take care of yourselves, stay healthy, and yeah, see ya. Bye.